So welcome. This is our ANZREG webinar coming to you across several different time zones. I think we've got 9 o'clock AWST time, 11 AM AEST time, 11:30 ACDT time, don't ask me to remember all these acronyms, midday AEDT, and 2 PM in the afternoon New Zealand time, which is where I'm located at the moment in Auckland. I'm delighted to invitation from Jessie Donaghey, and it's, as you know, it's entitled Primo Analysing Zero Search Results to Improve the User Experience. So Jessie is currently the Acting Manager of the Digital Library Services at Bond University, and I believe this is a presentation that she's already done at Igloo. This is an opportunity for us to see this live, if you like, post Igloo. I myself didn't make it Igloo last year, so I'm looking forward to this. Before I hand over to Jessie, I'll just make a couple of notes about the logistics, you know, in case you haven't been on one of these webinars before. Basically what I'll do is I'll have Themans muted throughout the presentation, and Jessie will run through her presentation. Then at the end of that, we'll have an opportunity for questions. If you don't have a microphone or you've got technical difficulties, you can just use the little chat interface to send the question to me, and I can ask it on your behalf. If your sound's all working fine, just send me a little message in the chat interface to say you've got a question, and I'll unmute your microphone. We're also recording this session, so there's a number of people, I believe, who are there's a public holiday today in certain parts of Australia, so we're making sure this will be recorded, and we'll get it up on the ANZREG site within the next probably 2 or 3 days. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jessie. I shall wave the magic wand, Jessie, and make you the presenter, and then we should be all well. Now let's have a look. Make presenter. Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay. Can everybody see my slides now?
Yep, that's working just perfectly. Thanks. I'll mute myself now. So.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just jump straight in. So this slide was more for the benefit of our international counterparts at the Igloo conference, but if you're not aware, Bond University is located on the Gold Coast in Queensland. We're Australia's first private not-for-profit independent university, and we've had Primo and Alma since April 2015, and previous to that we had Summon and ALIF 13. So libraries are highly focused on user experience. We're always set on improving our services and access to resources. We're constantly comparing the way we deliver the library experience to our commercial competitors or trend-setting design. With this in mind, I wanted to find out how I could use the wealth of data available in Primo Analytics to improve the user experience. As I analysed the data, I also had to keep in mind the design principles of the new user interface, such as reducing cognitive load for users and focusing on an action-oriented design with relevant scopes. As any findings or recommendations I made as a result of the data analysis would impact our configuration decisions for the new user interface. So I decided to just narrow my analysis to one section of Primo Analytics, and that was the zero result searches. I felt these analytics would provide insight into where our users were running into trouble and also provide a different perspective to that gained through other user behaviour focused studies, such as usability studies. On the slide I've listed some of the questions I was hoping to be able to answer, and others which I was unable to answer even with the use of other Primo Analytic reports. So if you're familiar with Primo Analytics at all, you're able to choose from a selection of attributes and measures to create a report. So the screenshots Primo interface here indicate where the attributes from Primo Analytics are found in our interface. So I focused on, in my analysis, the active tab and the search scopes. So we've got 2 tabs, the all resources and then course resources. And we have about 6 search scopes. So we've got one for everything, We have a scope for each of our libraries, one for journals, one for video, multimedia and images, and then finally a scope for our institutional repository. There were also a range of attributes that I could analyse in the advanced search as well. So if people chose to use advanced search, I could find out what fields they were searching, what resource type, pre-filter they had selected, and the search type. Before I started delving into the copious amounts of data that it's possible to generate in analytics, I decided to restrict the data I would analyse just to one semester. So this would allow me to do a few different comparisons with the data, such as trying to determine whether user behaviour changed over time. One view that Primo Analytics couldn't provide was whether the searches conducted were for known items or whether they were more exploratory searches. So I did choose to review search terms and search strings and assign it myself as whether it was a known item search or an exploratory search. But I only did this for a small amount of the data. So then I analysed search strings in their attribute groupings to determine common themes and also get a picture of user behaviour over a period of time. I also sometimes attempted to replicate the search just to get a feel for exactly how Primo handled the zero result search, such as did it prompt the user with an accurate "did you mean" suggestion. So as I mentioned, I did spend a little bit of time analysing search strings to determine what kinds of searches our users were conducting when they returned zero results. And I found that in the first 4 weeks of semester that most of the searches were for known items, whereas in the last 4 weeks of semester, exploratory searches returned more zero results, but only just. And as I analysed the known item searches, I noticed that searches for database titles were frequent. So it was interesting to note that the number of zero result searches for database titles were less in the last 4 weeks of semester than they were in the beginning. So we could interpret this as students learning successful methods for locating database titles over time. So this table here shows the number of zero result searches that used a scope over the entire semester. If you ignore the yellow section, which is the all resources scope, there's our default scope, you can see that the number of zero result searches that used a scope was higher towards the beginning of the semester than the later part of semester. So this could just reflect the change in the library use, or maybe that users learnt more successful methods for using search scopes in Primo as the semester progressed. I found that 60% of all of our zero result searches had used the default all resources search scope. And looking at the details for how users in the all resources scope, overall there weren't a huge amount of problems, just that the keyword chosen or the item that we're looking for didn't retrieve any results. But some of the issues I did identify were spelling and incorrect use of quotation marks and natural language searches. It looked like in some instances that quotation marks were overused or used incorrectly. Mistyping or incorrect spelling was particularly a problem for database title searches. In one instance I actually found a database spelt 9 different ways, and this was just in the first 4 weeks of so. And out of interest, I replicated these searches in Google and found that all but one spelling retrieved the database. So this could reflect or indicate a particular behaviour of students where they feel that close enough should be good enough for Primo to return the result they expect. Natural language was also used in a lot of the exploratory searches, such as search terms literature review on IKEA furniture. 12% of all the zero result searches had used our course resources scope. When I started the analysis of searches using this scope, a few things did stand out. fields that I assumed were searchable were in fact not searchable. So we have an academic department scope in our course resources scope, but in fact it wasn't searchable. The edition field for a book wasn't searchable either, but both of these things were problems that I was able to solve fairly easily. Once again, spelling was a bit of a problem, as were database title searches, but this time they were looking in our course resources tab for databases. So I found 6% of all of our zero result searches had been conducted in using our main or our law library scopes. And in 2015 we conducted a focus group, and one of the questions we asked the students is what they thought their search would return if they used, say, the law library scope. And they actually said they would have expected both electronic and physical items in the library. So their belief was that it was more of a subject search rather than a location search. Once again, the use of natural language searching was evident in these search scopes. So a search string containing the terms books on cloud computing using the main library scope returned 0 results. Interestingly, if you conduct the exact same search, books on cloud computing in Google, you actually get books on cloud computing. So 19% of zero result searches used the journal scope or the A journals list. So I did find some significant problems with the searches conducted using these scopes. Hardly any of the searches were for actual journal titles. Instead, they were either known item searches, such as articles or database titles, or exploratory searches that seemed more suited to a search you would conduct in a journal database. I felt that it was quite evident in the zero result searches that the problem here was users expected to retrieve more than what these scopes can do. So this could be a problem with students incorrectly interpreting the label that we've given to a scope. Interestingly though, towards the beginning of semester there were lots of database title searches that retrieved 0 results, but towards the end of semester there was evidence that these 0 result searches decreased primarily in the A to Z journals list. And then on the flip side there were less searches for actual journal titles at the beginning of semester, and then there were more appearing towards the end of semester. So could this indicate that users learnt over time what the use of the journal scope and the A to Z journals list was for? I hope so. Unfortunately, I found that there is no did you mean functionality or 0 result suggestions available when you use the A to Z journal list like there is in the Primo Simple Search or Advanced Search. So as a result of my analysis, I came up with a few recommendations, some of which we have already completed and some of which are out of our control. With the scopes, considering that a big chunk of the 0 result searches had used a scope, I would really like to reevaluate the scope menu, and we have in fact done that, considering what we're going to do for the new user interface. I do feel that in the new user interface the visibility of the scopes has increased, so it's really important to ensure that the scopes we have available are useful and will help and not hinder users in their search. If you haven't already done this, I would recommend everyone check the searchable fields information about Primo and test to ensure that the fields you think are searchable actually are. For databases, locating databases seems to be a big problem facing our users. They may be told by their lecturer to use a specific database or can't remember exactly how to find them, so the first thing they do is search for it in the great search box on our homepage, and many times they probably successfully navigate to it this way. But what if they get the spelling wrong or mistype or use an incorrect scope? they can be taken to a dead end. I feel that Google can handle variant spellings of databases, so I would like to explore options are available to support this more in the future. Even if spelt correctly, databases may not appear as number one in the results, so we've actually started investigating how we can boost our databases in the search results. For the A to Z journals list, I would really like to see a list of suggestions for users who retrieve zero results, like they do in the simple search or advanced search. And considering that most of the zero result searches are article level or databases, we could easily display a suggestion to try the A to Z database list or simple search. But I've found out that this functionality isn't available, so I actually submitted an idea to the Idea Exchange and the link is there, so if you share interest in this, please feel free to vote. There were a number of search strings that I came across where users had used natural language in an attempt to find results. This is normal user behaviour in search engines, so I would really like to see in the future that some focus was given supporting natural language searches. So there may be a few simple natural language searches that could be supported, for example search strings that contain a specific format or resource type, such as someone actually using the term book or peer-reviewed article in their search string. And my experience of the DigiMean prompt when retrieving zero result searches has been quite positive. Many of the more well-known and popular databases, if spelt incorrectly in a search, provide a relevant DigiMean suggestion. However, many of the other databases that aren't so popular don't provide a suggestion if spelt incorrectly. And I would specifically like to see functionality extended to more database titles, with Primo and including the A to Z journal list. Many databases have bigger names with quite distinct spelling, so it's really easy for anyone to get these wrong. Many websites that you now visit also pop up with a chat box if you're on their website for more than a couple minutes, and I wonder if it would be helpful to have a chat box pop up for users on screen if they turn zero result searches, whether it's in the simple search or in the A to Z journals list. So many of my suggestions here are more minor tweaks than huge overhauls, but I think these small steps towards improvement can, for some users, have a huge impact on their experience with the library. So thank you everybody, I zoomed through that, but yeah, happy to answer lots of questions.
Great, thanks Jessie. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to just say, I've got a question, or in the chat box, and I'll unmute your microphone. Or I'm happy to ask questions as well, of course, as I said before, if you don't have a microphone. One quick question from me, Jessie, are you continuing to analyse the results? Like, are you going to continue collecting those, and are they continuing to influence kind of, your decisions around the, like Primo interface and also your database interface searches?
Yeah, so I haven't done the analysis again this year, but I'd really like to do that once we go live with the new interface. So a lot of the analysis here we are going to apply to our configuration of the new user interface. So once we've made those changes and we're live with that, it'd be great to do another semester of analysis just to see if an impact has been made at all. So like for example, I mentioned that we have 6 search scopes, and we're going to drastically reduce that number because we actually have a lot of those search scopes already available as facets. I'd also like to explore how we can embed the chat into Primo as well in the new user interface. So it'd be interesting to see if there has been an impact on the total number of zero result searches after we've done those changes. And I did, at the conference, someone asked the question, how many zero result searches are there out of your total number of searches? And at the time I didn't think that data was available, or I couldn't find it. But since then I did actually have a bit more of a dig around in the Primo reports, and I found out that it's about 10% overall for all of our searches are actually zero result searches. So that's one way, once we make these changes and go live with the new UI, I'd like to see that 10% hopefully drop.
Yeah, it gives you a point of difference, doesn't it, that you can measure against. We do have a question from Margie Whalen. Says, thanks Jessie, that was a really interesting presentation. How difficult is it to extract the data from Primo itself? Do you have any suggestions for that stage?
So I don't have to extract anything myself. We use the Primo Analytics reports that are available in the Primo Analytics in the back office. So that was pretty easy. I just chose a date range and added the attributes to the report that I wanted, and yeah, then the data was there. And I only used Excel to analyse the data. I didn't do anything too fancy other than pivot tables. So I really try and keep it as simple as possible so it's easy to replicate in the future as well. But I'm happy to share those. I think in Primo Analytics we can share our reports, and if you run that in your own instance you should be able to get your own data. So I'm certainly happy to put that report in an Unity folder if that would be of use to anyone.
Great, thanks Jessie. Any other questions from anyone? Oh, Margie just said, thanks Jessie, would love to see your report in the community area. So I think that's a definite yes for the report.
All right, I'll do that, and then I'll send around the location once it's in there.
Great, thank you. Incidentally, when are you looking to go live with the new Primo UI? It's probably the burning question on everyone's mind at the moment.
So that's going to be the 1st of May. Our second semester starts the second week of May, so we want to have it all ready to go then.
Yep. Any other questions? We'll just wait for half a minute or so. There's a comment from Anna at Unitech saying maybe we can get everyone to vote for your ideas on the Ideas Exchange page.
Please do. After the conference last year, I got a lot of votes. That was really lovely. And Mary, who I believe is the product manager at Ex Libris for Primo, she did make a comment that we would explore adding that to the roadmap, but I haven't actually seen it on the roadmap at all. So more votes will probably boost that in their view.
Definitely. All right, we'll have to make sure we will do that. Any other questions from people before we close? Just one comment from Carla saying no questions from me, but lots of great idea about smiley face. So yeah, definitely.
Great.
All right, well thank you. Thanks Jessie. So what I'm going to do, because I know it can be a little bit disconcerting when you're doing one of these presentations and you know people are listening but you can't actually hear them or interact with them because all the microphones go on, you get a bit of feedback. But what I like to do these is just turn the microphones all on so we can all perhaps give Jessie a decent round of applause and say thank you very much. And as I said before, we'll make this recording available on the ANZREG website in the next few days. So thanks everyone, and I'll just turn on our microphones so we can all give her a round of applause.